Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, along with Candy Ebling, and leading off and talking first is Rick Curti. How you doing, Rick?
Hey guys, how are you?
How's everything going up in Charlotte Bats territory?
It's fine. We're under lockdown, so other than that, we're doing fine.
Okay, well, I know you've been looking forward to this rant for a while, and it's about a guy that both of us can't stand. But I'll let you mention the guy's name.
Well, my bone I have to pick tonight is with ESPN's own, not Stephen A., but Max Kellerman. Yes, Max Kellerman, the most annoying human being on the face of the earth. The little mosquito that you just want to swat away and just tell him to be quiet. And I don't even watch him anymore. I mean, it's just so nauseating. I don't even know who's worse, Stephen A. or Max, but Mad Max, you know, he just needs to go. He's terrible on there. He's obnoxious. He's annoying. He doesn't know what he's talking about. His opinions are idiotic. He's been talking about the decline of Tom Brady for the past 8 years. Um, he's always wrong. I just wish Max would go away and just go back to boxing. You're very good at boxing. I love doing boxing. You're great as an analyst. But on ESPN, when you're doing your little debates with Stephen A., I don't know what's worse. Stephen A. Shouting and yelling where my eardrums are bleeding, or your obnoxious, annoying, idiotic comments. So who knows what it is, but Max Kellerman is a big on my radar.
Well, I'll tell you, he's becoming a big on my radar, but I can't quite shut him off as much as you can because I'm providing on that screwball, okay, to go ahead and provide me with content, whether it's stupid or not, on the air. And I'll give you one of my favorites is that he thinks that Matthew Stafford should be traded to the New England Patriots, and he thinks, and I'm telling you, this is stupid. And he was actually called out today by your favorite announcer, Stephen A. Smith, Marcus Spears, and of course Mel Kiper decided to get him in there too. How do you trade Matthew Stafford to the Patriots when number one, Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are under fire, okay, and they have to win or else? And I just cannot see such a thing. And let's face it, I don't think the Lions' problems are attributed to Matt Stafford. I think there are a lot of other problems. But how on earth do you think they're going to let a guy who's probably got close to 40,000 yards passing anyways, when it's a matter of not surrounding Matt with a running game, much less, keeping continuity on that offense. So I just think Max, I just can't stomach the guy. There's some things I can't study in life, and one thing I can't study or stand is stupidity and never being able to do your homework as a broadcaster, and then any professional that could go ahead and you notice that. Another guy that I can bring into this conversation is a guy that I dealt with a few years ago named Chip Carey. And I say this about Chip Carey because he was able to get in broadcasting because his grandpa, Harry Carey, and Skip Carey, so he certainly had an in to get in the industry. And there are a lot of things that stand out about Chip. And one of the things that Chip messed up on badly was when the Tigers were playing the Minnesota Twins, the Detroit Tigers. He made so many errors during a Fox broadcast that was one of the reasons that he went ahead and got exiled, and now he's buried in Atlanta with one of the local Fox affiliates there, but not good enough to be in the big show. So say what you want, but Max Kellerman, to me, you're right. He's good for boxing, okay, and there's some guys that are just good at a particular sport. But when you try to go ahead and bring them in to look at a lot of different ones, then they are definitely lost in space. Okay, where's Dr. Zachary Smith when we need him?
Yeah, I mean, he's just really bad. He's just really, he's so obnoxious. Even when he's wrong, and he'll go back, no, that's not what I said. And if I said that's not what I meant, I'm like, oh, shut up, Max. Just go away. And, I mean, for the Lions, the Lions have done a lot of stupid things, as an organization. One thing, getting Matt Patricia as head coach, but Jim Caldwell was the most idiotic thing I ever saw. And you can see why Barry Sanders left. But for them to trade away Matt Stafford, a future Hall of Famer, who are they going to get to play quarterback for one thing? Stafford is not the problem. The Lions have a lot of problems, and it ain't Matthew Stafford. He's doing his job. It's not his fault that he's in an organization that's run poorly. So he ain't the issue. Who are they going to get as quarterback? And I mean, the Patriots are so depleted with players. I mean, who are they going to? And there's no way they're going to give up draft picks to get Matthew Stafford. So I mean, it makes no sense. He's an idiot. We all know he's an idiot. And ESPN, I mean, they keep losing so many people to Fox Sports. So I guess they're just like, well, I guess we're stuck with him.
Well, I mean, yeah, we are. But to me, if I wanted to come up with one word that describes Max Kellerman, you talk about a first-class puppet, a guy that Smith can go out there and rile up and get away with it. And everybody that goes on with Max Kellerman has a field day with the guy. I'm not saying that he's not an intelligent person. I'm not going to go there. I'll bet Max is very highly intelligent. But you're right. The word boneheaded and some of the things that come out of his mouth are what defines what I can't stand with the man. I can't stomach with it. I mean, we've taught you how to be a journalist at times, and you're a good ranter, so you've come a long way from the beginning. But and I say this in fun, okay? But tell me, what is it the most, though, that irritates you about a Max Kellerman?
He's just obnoxious, I don't know if it's his New York accent or something like that, or he's like, I don't know, he just sounds like he tries to be intelligent, but when he talks, he sounds idiotic. And he just makes these idiotic, stupid things, and then when he's wrong, he never admits he's wrong. He's been talking about Tom Brady being on decline for the last 8 years, and I'm like, how many Super Bowls did he win during that 8 years? The last 2 years, yeah, he's declined. He's 43 years old. What do you expect for him to do? Expect him to get better? He's 43 years old, and so amazing that he's still a quarterback, and it's amazing he's putting up the numbers at that age. So I can see 2 years, but I've been talking about the decline of Tom Brady for the past 8 years. Oh, no, I mean the past 5 years. Well, the past 6 years, shut up, Max. Just go back to boxing. I think he's got punched in the head so much that he don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, how do you criticize Tom Brady? The guy has more Super Bowls than any quarterback out there at a half a dozen. And I don't know what will happen in Tampa, but he'll certainly put not only rear fans in the stands, but I think he's going to actually have a pretty good run there. I think the Tom Brady exile from New England was more that Brady really felt like he could, show Belichick he made a mistake by giving me father times to exit a little too prematurely and not keeping me in there. But, Tom's on a mission to prove a lot of people wrong. I don't know about you, but when people doubt me, I really work hard to prove them wrong in a big way. I really, really do. I mean, that motivates me. And, how do you tell me that Tom Brady's on the decline? So he doesn't win a Super Bowl or get to an AFC championship. And this year you went against a guy like Patrick Mahomes, a rising star. Tom Brady's had a great career. 20 years in one place is unbelievable. And I can't help the fact that he wants to be a George Blanda. Nothing wrong with it. As long as you feel that your play is good enough to not be self-destructive and they surround you with the personnel, I see no reason to think that Tom Brady won't succeed in Tampa. And I think the New England Patriots are going to miss an awful lot. And Belichick, in the end, now is on a mission to prove everyone wrong. So you have the clash of two egos here. But getting back to Kellerman, how can you sit here and tell me that a Super Bowl winning quarterback of 6 years is on the decline? That's beyond my wildest of imagination.
Yeah, he's crazy, and I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan, but anyone that plays that long in the same position and that successful, earns my respect, and he's earned mine, and just Max is just he just needs to go away. I think what he does. He tries to out Stephen A. Smith, and when Stephen A. does all this yelling and screaming and hollering and whooping and wallering, he's got to up him and just be more like the calming voice. But then, okay, well, I gotta disagree with him, so let me say something really stupid. And like I said, I don't even watch the show anymore. It's so annoying, it's so dumb, and I wish ESPN would just get rid of him. Get somebody else better on there. maybe like just get somebody. I mean, get Mike Golick's son and replace him, or just somebody who has some common sense that knows what he's talking about. And like I said, they put Max back on boxing where he was really good at that. Leave him in boxing for the rest of his career, and just get somebody on there that has some intelligence and just knows what they're talking about. And when they're wrong about something, just say, "Hey, I was wrong." Just like I thought Tom Brady would stick with the Patriots, I was wrong about that.
Well, the first time I saw Max Kellerman ever on ESPN was at the show with Tony Reality. Help me out there. Around the Horn, is that what it was called?
Yes.
Yeah, he was awful there too. He was, and then they shipped him out to L.A. and then they brought him in here to be Smith's sparring partner because he couldn't deal with him any other way. And Smith was looking for a first-class whipping boy, and boy, did he get a good one. I mean, who wouldn't want to go ahead and step on him and beat him every single time? I just, if you're going to argue, you've got to do it based on strength and certain statistics, and not too many statistics either. Just hardcore stuff. You know what I mean, Rick? And that's what I see.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, like I said, he's just very obnoxious, very annoying, and ESPN's got some way better people on there that Stephen A could argue with and actually have a nice, reasonable, discussion or something like that. And like I said, he tries to out Stephen A. Smith him. I don't know if he's trying to be like Skip Bayless II, or ESPN told him, just be like Skip Bayless, but he's just an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Getting rid of Matthew Stafford or Tom Brady on the decline for the last 8 years. And I mean, how many Super Bowls did Tom Brady win during that 8 years? The guy still threw for 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns. Like I said, he's 43 years old. What do you expect? So, he's just dumb, and I wish he would just go away and, just disappear. And like I said, ESPN just don't have anybody else. Will Kane would have been a better suitable replacement when Skip Bayless left or someone like that. But, I mean, they just try to dig too deep with Max Kellerman, thinking, I guess, people would like him. And he's just incredibly obnoxious.
Hey, Rick, back to that Tom Brady decline. I'd take Tom Brady these last 2 years over probably 3/4 of the quarterbacks that are playing in the league right now.
Oh, yeah, me too. I mean, I'd take him. I mean, the Panthers just got rid of Cam Newton, and so I said, man, if I'd take Tom Brady at 53 years old over Cam Newton, or I'd take a 63-year-old Tom Brady over a Jameis Winston or any of these quarterbacks. I mean, he's just a great player, and he's so intelligent because he's very cerebral. And I think that's Tom Brady's strength. So I totally agree with you. And I take a 63-year-old Tom Brady, than Jameis Winston, a Cam Newton, or someone else, or an Andy Dalton.
You're right. He plays more with not just his body, which, mind you, he has kept in really good shape. He plays with his mind, and he has a mind for football and the game, and that makes him a quarterback above most of the other quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, blue-collar work ethic with who can outfox anybody in chess. I don't know about Peyton Manning chess-wise, but you get the draw. I like your reference to Will Kane, though. I've seen Will Kane hold his own against Stephen A. Smith. I really have, and I got to tell you, Will Kane, I believe, is a lawyer by trade, and he's in the sports business. So if you've got a lawyer by trade who knows how to go ahead and, be able to deal with arguing debate, then Will Kane would hold his own against anybody. I mean, after all, they do it in court, don't they, Rick? I mean, really. Would you dare argue with a lawyer, let alone on sports, and say no, all the rebuttals and refuting, And I took argumentation and debate when I was in college. It wasn't that bad at it, but, I became a whole lot better. But when I, once upon a time, worked in in-home sales, and boy, you learn pretty damn quick, that's for sure. Candy, what else do you want to add to it?
No. Go ahead, Rick.
Like I said, you can get anybody else you want, like a Will Kane or, whoever you want to get. I don't even mind having Booger McFarland on there, and I can't stand that guy either. But, I mean, anybody could be better than Max Kellerman. So, Just put him back in boxing. Get Will Kane on there. Get Booger McFarlane. Get somebody else on there. I mean, whatever. Maybe they can go on LinkedIn and put a job search for a co-host with Stephen A. Looking for someone to deal with an incredibly obnoxious human being as Stephen A.
Well, let's face it.
Somebody.
Let's face it, Rick. They could go out and they could get someone a lot cheaper talent than what they're doing, and you'd get a better result at the end of the day.
Well, Rob Parker was a guy that I've actually worked with in the Detroit media, and he went over to Fox, and he was at ESPN. I think Rob Parker's as good as they get. In fact, you want to talk about a great Rob Parker story that I've ever had, was when we were working a game, ironically, against the Panthers, and Rob Parker really hated Rod Marinelli, as did I, because how do you go ahead and fly a team take a day trip to Oakland thinking that you're going to try to be the old military type of coach and expect them to compete, and they got flattened. And, Rod Marinelli to me is the biggest idiot I've ever seen. It's only appropriate that he was 0-16, but Rob Parker went out there and hammered Marinelli, and what are the Lions PR people going to do? Not a whole lot, I mean, it's one thing for a PR guy to literally protect his coach, but there was no defending him on the road with a few of us out there looking for answers, and nobody ever said being a beat writer was ever easy in covering a team, but nonetheless, to me, it's just what it is. But, well, I'm going to go back to your point, Rick. Will Kane, to me, could hold his own with anybody, and I'm glad that he does have a prominent role with ESPN. I just hope they can utilize him a lot more. I want to go back to Chip Carey for a second, though, and I only bring him up again because I've learned that, covering sports for the better part of 40 years, that if you don't do your homework, that's why they give you press releases. That's why you better invest into a highlighter and know that you have enough spare paper so you can write down the necessary notes that you really need so that you don't look bad on the air. And I don't know how much pre-production goes into First Take at all. I really don't. But I can tell you right now, I mean, nobody really cares about a first-class shouting match.
Yeah.
I remember when we were working together with Peter Ween on the Sports Exchange on the WEI network. There were moments that I had my rants, and Peter and I had a great working relationship, a great co-host. But he told me when you ranted, our audience went down by a couple hundred people. And I said, really? I said, well, people just don't get into that too much. If you're yelling and screaming, if you're making an intelligent rant and conversational tone, then by all means, it's acceptable, because you certainly are trying to make your point of view in such a manner, Rick, that you look credible doing it. Well, we got a couple more minutes to go. Anything else you want to close about Max Keller before we give you an opportunity to promote what you're doing?
Yeah, he just needs to go away. I think, it was funny because before he got into sports and all that stuff, he was actually a rapper. And yeah, he was, and so maybe he can go back to doing rap music or something like that, because like I said, he's a great boxing analyst. I love him on ESPN boxing and all that stuff, but like I said, when he's on there, and when I heard that he was going to replace Skip Bayless, and I thought, oh gosh, but I'll give it a chance. I saw 2 episodes and I never saw it again, because he was worse than Stephen A. And I just can't, like I said, I can't stand the yelling and the screaming and the hollering and the whooping and about nothing. It's just all mouth and all bark and no bite with Stephen A. And Max Kellerman makes it even worse with his idiotic, pointless, and really nobody's listening to you, and really nobody cares. So he just needs to go away.
All right, well, now you have another 2 minutes to go ahead and talk about what you represent and how people can find you.
Well, I'm the founder and CEO of the Charlotte Bats, and let's bring MLB to Charlotte, and it's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring Major League Baseball to Charlotte. You can check out our website at www.charlottebats.com. We're also on Facebook at Charlotte Bats Baseball. We're on Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball. We're also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. And if you have any questions or comments or how you like to get involved, we're charlottebatsbaseball@gmail.com. That's CLTbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
And do you have 2 Twitter handles?
Yeah, I'm actually on Twitter at Rick Curti, and I'm also at Charlotte Bats Baseball, so you can reach either account on there, and we post every single day. And like I said, you have any questions or comments, just don't be afraid to contact me.
All right, Rick, well done. 48 hours to go ahead and figure out what you're going to talk about come Thursday night. Rick Curti, folks, is a regular contributor here on the Sports Exchange and whatever other platforms we need him. So, Rick, thanks for being on the program, and you'll have 48 hours to figure out what you're going to ramble about next. All righty?
Well, all right, no problem. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks for your time.
Rick.
Bye-bye. What are your thoughts about the credibility of this rant? Is there some substance to it? You're not big on the yelling thing anyways, are you?
No, I'm not big on yelling. I mean, yelling doesn't really solve anything except for bringing people's blood pressure up. It's not conducive to have a good conversation argument-wise. It might have drawn a good little TV ratings here and there, but for the most part, I think people would much rather hear intelligent people talking intelligently about a topic. I mean, you and I can debate till the cows come home. I mean, you cover the Lions, I cover the Packers. You know, they play each other. We both argue, but we at the end of the day, we respect each other's opinions, and everyone has a right to an opinion. But that doesn't mean you want to force it down somebody else's throat.
First of all, Candy, you and I don't argue. We don't when it comes to this. The fact of the matter is, and I say this because I really believe in my mind, that we don't argue. You have two highly intelligent people that really have compassion for the teams for where we came from. These are the same two teams that, by the way, brought us together. Let's not forget that. Right. And they played on January 1st, 2017.
Yep.
So it wasn't so bad, and it was a very predictable outcome anyway. So,
but I think it goes more than just even Lions. I mean, it's all of our sports teams. We have an admiration for our hometowns and our home teams, and we have a passion for them. And that passion comes out a couple times a year, especially. But
yeah, we don't differ on the Detroit Red Wings.
No, I'll give you the Red Wings.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I'll take that as much as I can get it. With that said, we bring in our next guest, our football insider, David Levin. David, welcome back to the Sports Exchange. You're with Scott and Candy.
Wow. Okay, how are you guys doing?
We're doing fine, thank you.
We're doing just fine, David. How are you?
I'm okay.
How's everything up in Jacksonville?
Well, I guess it's okay. I mean, we're in the midst of free agency, making a few moves tonight. I don't know if you guys saw the social media and some of the news wires. But,
seen a few.
We're
I couldn't look at any in the last hour because I'm busy getting this bad boy set up.
Now that you know about Tyler Eifert and the deal they're working right now to get him here.
I think I had heard something about that. Okay, it wasn't final, but they are working on it.
It hasn't been finalized yet, but that's one of the guys we've talked about that I'm high on as far as low risk, high reward. You know, kind of a deal like that where the Jaguars would definitely benefit from an incentive-related, contract where they're not putting out a lot of money. And he did play all 16 games last year, so maybe he is still the best tight end in the room, even if he's signed to a one-year deal. Anyway, I know we talked earlier that you wanted to talk more about the NFL tonight, so let's get to it.
Go ahead.
Things are going on all over the place. I just saw that Brashard Perriman is going to sign a deal with the Jets. That just came over the wire. I don't know much about it, but since Robbie Anderson is moving on, that seems like a logical transition from one receiver to another. Gives Sam Darnold another pass receiver with speed. The NFL has been kind of tricky the last couple of days, and then we talked about that a little bit last week. There are players still on the board that we expected to be gone. Jadeveon Clowney. There's been talks that there would be a trade for Unique Ngakoue. There are still good players. Dominican Sue is out there that you would have expected to already come off the board to help teams, especially that are in need of defense. And the market is as weird as stock market is right now in real life. I don't know what to make of it, Scott. You got an idea what's going on here?
No, not really. I mean, I think, there's so much hype into that first week. You want to see what the breadcrumbs are. And wait, now you're talking about the breadcrumbs, and you have a lot of big name breadcrumbs that are out there for sure. Let's start with Cam Newton. Do you think that he winds up with New England?
I do. I know we've talked about the fact that we like Andy Dalton there, and we've talked a little bit about Andy Dalton maybe coming to Jacksonville and the pros and cons of that. I think it opens the door now that they've released him that, Bill Belichick is going to place a call and say, hey, Cam, we need you. I don't realistically think that, Jared Stidham or Brian Hoyer strikes fear in anybody in the AFC East. Newton is a reclamation project, I guess you would call it, because of what's going on the last couple of years with his health. And I don't know whether he returns to, was it 2015 when he won the MVP? But he's better than anything that the Patriots have on their roster right now. And they would need somebody with maturity and ability to come in and replace somebody like Tom Brady. I'm not a huge Cam Newton fan. I know I appreciate. I've told you this, face to face.
Right.
I appreciate his ability. He's a great quarterback. I think that he has some mechanical issues of late. I also think that he needs to be a little more of a leader. And for God's sake, he's got to get rid of the wardrobe after the games, because those press conferences are just painful to watch.
Yeah. No kidding.
But I would like to see Andy Dalton in New England, but I do think that Cam probably it's a better bet if he signs up with the Patriots right now.
Well, he's a free agent. One thing we can't lose sight of is that Cam Newton is 0-8 in his last 8 starts. So,
Right.
I know what was he like 68 and 55, but that you add those 8 losses in a row, and then his record's a little bit more
Right.
formidable, much less the injury history. And yes, his dress attire definitely needs a lot of work. So I'm not going to nail him for his dress attire. Maybe someone will put up with it, but 0-8 doesn't help sell Cam Newton,
No.
especially when there's a lot of questions with his medicals.
And I think that part of it too, we discussed this a little bit last week with Jameis Winston. Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, I don't know if an Andy Dalton deal gets done somewhere. Somewhere in the middle, somebody has to set a price range, or at least a variance there, where we know that these 3 quarterbacks probably aren't worth what they think they are, especially Jameis Winston. I don't know what the market value is for Cam Newton. I know that Andy Dalton probably would be the cheapest get of the 3. At least I would think he would be. But I don't know. Selling Cam Newton on going to New England and winning a Super Bowl is probably a lot easier when determining a contract. It might be with Jameis if he can tone down the "gee, I'm balling" attitude. Andy Dalton's a game manager, and he's logical, but now that Cam's on the market, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, Jameis Winston to New England doesn't quite work for me. It really doesn't. I could actually see Jameis Winston, believe it or not, either in Jacksonville or even the Miami Dolphins.
Well, we had talked about that a little bit too. I'm now starting to see it, and I guess you're bringing me over to the dark side.
Okay.
You want to call it that? I see it unfolding. The Bortles deal, the longer he stays out there, the longer I think he stays in LA, just like you.
Right.
There's an appeal to it. Blake's personality kind of, he likes being in LA. I don't see why they wouldn't re-sign him, at least maybe even just another 1-year deal and see what happens. Because, for all we know, Jared Goff may stink up the joint, and at least Blake knows the offense. I think that Jameis Winston to Jacksonville makes sense if there are a few things happen. First of all, he would have to take a serious pay cut, and it would have to be a show-me thing. And I know that he threw those 5,000 yards, he threw 30 touchdowns. But those 30 interceptions are basically what hammers him.
Right.
Somebody said locally today, which was really smart, it isn't so much that he couldn't see the field, and I know he had LASIK surgery. Remember, he squints quite a bit. He doesn't wear contacts when he's on the field. It's not the fact that he doesn't see the field. he hurries things too much, and he hurries things into a spot, and you can see that there's an uneasy rush in the way he once he gets the ball and he stops back. He has to work on his mechanics, and I don't, he also has to have somebody in his ear, kind of like what Jimbo Fisher did at Florida State, to calm his butt down. And I don't know. I don't know whether that Jay Gruden has that personality to be able to say, okay, if he's put in the game, he's going to ride his butt and say, "Now stop it. This is what we're going to do." That type of mentality.
Well, let me offer you a couple of observations about a couple of things. I guess there are 3 pro football teams in L.A. We have the Chargers, the Rams, and we have the L.A. Wildcats of the XFL. So as a result, if Blake wants to stay there bad enough and nobody can go ahead and take him, he can always stay out there. But I think he's playing over at the Galaxy's place. So, and Carson.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh, I didn't think of that.
Well, I am. You talk about, you gave me the L.A. connection, and now I'm beloved in L.A. now with some of my Southern California sports broadcasters. I'm hearing some good positive vibes about the Motor City Madmouth out in the West Coast, and I love it. The love.
You are doing the chain there. You're going from place to place to place.
Man.
You're expanding.
COVD 19. Nah, I don't care. At some point when this thing does settle down a little bit, I'll be taking my act on the road. Mark my words. I got a reputation. You know how it is when you try.
He starts playing in Vegas. Look out, okay?
I'm not going to Vegas. The only thing I'm going to Vegas there, David, is to see my longtime sports caster, Mark Wilson. Mark and I have been good friends all the way back to our days in South Florida when he was the weekend guy when Tony Segreto was here back in the day. If I go there, then Mark Wilson will be at the top of my list.
Let me just say that's a long time ago. I remember those days. I know what that's like.
But Mark's been a good friend of mine years, whether we stay in touch on social media. Now, I have heard talk that I think Winston, you never know, maybe the Dolphins like that splash big name, and then Stephen Ross is willing to get a bargain basement for it. Maybe you go down that territory depending on what happens in the draft. But that's item number 1. Or maybe the New Orleans Saints have probably seen a lot of them, and they can get him cheap, and maybe he'll take Teddy Bridgewater's place on the bench. Just Sean Payton could corral him. It's going, and I know there's talk about it in Pittsburgh as well. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You can see it. No, I was going to say, I was going to say New Orleans might be a fit for him as well, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Sure.
It's going to be very interesting to see, especially in the next couple of weeks, because the draft now will start to take form, and we've discussed that nobody's going to be there, and how this is going to get totally retro 1980s ESPN, ballroom. They're dumbing it down essentially for everybody's safety. You could still see Jameis Winston. You could still. I don't think. You could see Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton on the free agent market for maybe the next 2 weeks. I don't think Cam Newton stays there. There's just, because if you have to choose between Newton, Winston, and Dalton, Newton, I believe, is the guy you're going to take first.
Not me.
I don't know how. You may not feel that way.
Well, I mean, Dalton, by the way, has to be acquired via trade, just so you know. He's not a free agent unless they release him. And he has such a team-friendly contract. If the Bengals can't get the right fit for him, you never know. He might just very well back up Burrow for another year and see what happens. I wouldn't see that as out of the reach. I think the Bengals would certainly like to do Andy a favor and go ahead and bring in, give him an opportunity to play somewhere else. But I'm not so much ruling that out at all. So
no, I don't either. And it could happen. It's not... I like Andy Dalton, and it's kind of odd that Cam Newton and Andy Dalton are now possibly playing somewhere else this year, because they were part of that really big famed quarterback class of 2011, where Newton was one, and Jake Locker was taken, and Blaine Gabbert was selected, and then in the second round, Andy Dalton is taken. And look what happens. Andy Dalton was, statistically, one of the better of the choices. So I don't know what to make of it.
Well, what to make of it is, I think that Andy Dalton, not Dutton. Now you got me thinking, combining the names. That's not my. I couldn't come up with that except I had my lemonade drink, and who knows. But nevertheless, getting back on point, Andy Dalton was with the Cincinnati Bengals, was 0-8 in the playoffs. I get that, and he made a lot out of nothing what he had to work with, and I think that Jay Gruden would be a good fit for him in Jacksonville if he doesn't go to New England.
I like it, but also remember this too: if any of these quarterbacks go to Jacksonville, and it could be all three of them, they're not there to back him up. Gardner Minshew will have to compete for that starting job. The Jaguars haven't come out yet and said he is the starter. I know that implication is that okay, we get rid of Foles, so we have Gardner. He's our guy. And I know that the Jaguars are high on him. Don't get me wrong, because they are. They wouldn't have made this deal if they weren't. But if Cam Newton or Jameis Winston or whoever come in and they're a veteran quarterback, they're not coming there to play second fiddle. They're going to come and compete for the starting job. Maybe the same way with Joe Flacco if he's healthy. And I'm just throwing that name out there because while you got three high-profile quarterbacks, Flacco may be willing to take a deal to stay in the NFL after his injury. So, it's an odd situation. No matter where any of these quarterbacks land, because it could be New Orleans backing up, it could be Miami as a backup, it could be New England, it could be, for all we know, Cam Newton's a decent fit with the LA Chargers, and nobody's mentioned that.
Well, there has been talk about that.
Has there been? Okay.
Yeah, but here's the deal, okay? Nick Foles got traded to the Bears, and he's not going there to be the back. I mean, there's going to be a legitimate competition with him out there with Mitchell Trubisky. Oh, yeah.
He's going to start. And because Nagy doesn't like the quarterback situation, and because I'm sure that the combination of Foles and DiFilippo will force that issue.
Well, DiFilippo was with the Jaguars last year, wasn't he?
Right, he was the offensive coordinator, now he's a quarterback.
Well, so there you go. He's out there again, reunited.
Yeah, so, right. Yeah, I'm not singing that song, by the way, but anyway.
Well, you may not. I don't sing any song because I'm not looking to make people deaf when I sing.
Well, Foles will start in Chicago. I really believe that.
Oh, I believe so, too.
That's not even, I don't even need to bet you on that one. That's house money. So what else you got going on?
Well, what I got going on right now is we're on a roll here, my man. So with that said, okay, one injury away, these guys are starters. So right now they just need to land somewhere and get a contract, a decent base with incentives if they're worried about getting to the money that they think they're going to get. And if they're that good, they can do a 1-year deal and then test the market a year from now. I mean, that's what I think. But Dalton would look good in a Jaguars uniform. Dalton would look
much easier for them next year, Scott, if you think about it, because the quarterback market next year is not that great.
Right.
And the college quarterbacks next year, from what I see, aren't that great either. So It may be a 1-year show me deal, and maybe Dalton staying for one more year and then benefiting from being a teacher and a mentor and whatever, and playing until Burrow is ready, and then he goes and he's able to pick his team. It's an odd situation. Plus, we don't know if everything's starting on time anyway, so everything is still up in the air.
All right, let's touch on a few other key points that we discussed earlier. Is Yannick, forcing the Jags hand to Philadelphia? It seems pretty obvious to me he's looking to go up I-95 and play for the city of brotherly hate if you're going to boost Santa Claus.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to say this because you and I have been in the locker room. Yannick Ngakoue is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet.
Right.
And if you talk to him about anything but football, he is the nicest guy in the world. But when you talk about football, number one, he's incredibly confident. I like that. His motor never stops, and I know it's a cliche and whatnot, but he's so committed to football. And there's that passion there. And the coaching staff talks about it. I mean, he's one of the best players that they love. He doesn't stop in practice. He doesn't stop when he's working out. He doesn't stop when he's this and that and the other. And then you read his social media, and he's cryptic as hell. And you don't know what the hell he's saying. And I, for one, have to ask my 20-year-old to take a look at it. He has to decipher it for me because I'm not hip. Not even close. But he's been posting stuff for the last couple of days about Trent Cole and the Eagles and putting stuff on his social media. And there's been discussion, and then there hasn't been discussion that the Eagles might be willing to part with a 2021 first-round pick. I know that there was some talk about possibly the 21st pick. I think that's what they draft, 21st pick, and Nelson Aguilar, and the Jaguars would have to throw in a fourth-round pick with it. But now Aguilar has been traded. I forgot where he's going.
I believe to the Raiders, isn't it?
I knew it was out west. I just didn't know where. And that makes sense for the Raiders. So now he's still there, and he has until I believe July 15th to sign his
tender
tag.
Right.
Or and then if he doesn't sign the tag, the Jaguars can't trade him, and basically they lose him. They keep his property, but there's some parameters there that there's some offsetting English there that I have to study and learn. He wants out of here so bad, and it's just you just want it to be done, but you also don't want to see the Jaguars get nothing in return like Calais Campbell.
Right.
So I don't know where that goes, but I know that the hot team right now is Philadelphia, regardless of what everybody's saying. Oh, there's nothing I've heard. Mike Kay in New Jersey, who covered the Jaguars for a while, said there's nothing going on there, because he covers the Eagles. Right. And then Josh Alpert of NBC says that there's talk, but there hasn't been a deal. And you can read anybody's tea leaves, and you can get five different answers. But I really think the Eagles right now are the hot team. And if it's not the Eagles, I think it's still going to be Seattle.
Well, I mean, Darius Slay got picked up by the Eagles, so I could see the Eagles making a splash if they're indeed looking to get Yannick. Okay, let's go on to a few other. Let's go on to a few other things while we have a few more minutes. Okay, which team has benefited by the most of free agency? You seem to think it's the Miami Dolphins.
I like the Dolphins as one of the teams that really helped themselves. They went out on the first day, and they were very aggressive. They got themselves help on the defense. They got themselves help with the running game. They added special teams help. This is and these deals aren't huge deals, but what it did was Brian Flores basically just put his own seal of approval and his own mark on the Dolphins. It's a good move for Miami. Remember, they let go all those veterans who wanted out, and they knew they would have to suffer for a year. So it was talking to him, and oh my gosh, they won 4 games, and in the process, they became Flores' team.
Right.
And then they had what, $80 million or whatever it was in free agency, and they started spending it, and they started spending it wisely. I see a scenario here where they're still going to try and trade up to get the number 1 pick, because I'm not sure they're sold on Tua. It's Tua and Burrow, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did try and get the first pick. But there's a scenario in my head that means that if they do that the Cincinnati Bengals actually at number 5 may get shut out of the top 3 quarterbacks.
No way. I'll stop you there. I don't see that happening. Joe Burrow's an Ohio kid. He's staying in Ohio. Now, could I see them go up to number 3 to get Justin Herbert? Well, that's another conversation. But I have my thoughts of Tua. Unless Stephen Ross is looking to make a splash move, and Stephen Ross does like to make splash moves, maybe Tua winds up in Miami. So it's a Tua, otherwise known as a TBD. Okay.
I know. So, the same thoughts of that. I was thinking, and just off the top of my head real quick, that Miami trades up to 1, and they take Tua to make sure they get Tua. Or they take Burrow at 1, and then Washington takes Tua at 2. And then at 3 or 4, the Chargers move up, and they take Justin Herbert.
If the Miami Dolphins go ahead and trade up to number 1 and they take Tua, I'm going to have nonstop mudslides with all the alcohol that I can have. Because that would be something I'd like to drown in. Oh, that's a mudslide of a move. No way, man.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but everything is crazy right now.
Well, yeah, but that's taking crazy to a different reason. My wife gives me...
Did his hair curl on that one?
What?
Did Scott's hair curl when I said that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, with that said, we'll take the craziness out of that conversation and steer toward the dynamic of the NFC South with Brady Breeze and Matt Ryan. And then we'll go on to your final point. Then we only have 5 minutes to get them both out.
Okay, well, is there any other division now that's more exciting? good quarterbacks. And I'm not. Brady and Breeze could be 60% of what they normally are, and they're still really exciting. And Matt Ryan, I think, is still an underrated quarterback because they don't give him enough due. That division is going to be bonkers. They could still have 3 5,000-yard passers, and that's unheard of. I'm real excited about that division for this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't discount the NFC North, and here's what I think about that. Number one, Matthew Stafford stays healthy all year. You got another 4,000 yards plus. Aaron Rodgers, if they ever commit to anything with the passing game, and I hear they're looking to get Devin Funchess to try to provide a veteran wide receiver. Kirk Cousins can put up yards, and if Nick Foles takes off in Chicago, I think that'd be the wild card. And our last point, let's talk about the QB shakeup in the NFL draft. You said you have a few theories now, and how this is all going to break down.
One of them was a quarterback theory, but I do think that there are teams that are going to move up for specific reasons because I really think this is going to be a defensive-heavy draft. I think that you've got 3 really good defensive players in the top 10. It depends on where the quarterbacks sit. Derek Brown of Auburn, Okuda, who he's a cornerback from Ohio State, and somewhere in there, Isaiah Simmons fits. And those are going to be the 3 wild cards, unless there's moving for the quarterbacks. I know that there's talk that there could be 4 quarterbacks taken on the first 15 picks, which I'm hoping that Jordan Love is not part of that package, but he's gaining steam. Wherever the 3 defensive players fit is how this draft shakes up, and I think that you could see Isaiah Simmons go as early as 3 to Detroit, which would mean that Okuda would go 4 to the Giants, and that shakes everything up. Because then you have your offensive linemen who are there. Derek Brown probably gets taken before 9, which the Jaguars are going to be very upset about, which makes them rethink what do they do. And I think that if that were to happen, they go offensive line instead of defensive line. Because I don't think Kinlaw is worth a top 10 pick. But I really think that what happens with those 3 players is going to shake up the whole top of half of the first round.
Yeah, Jordan Love's a wild card. All right, let's talk briefly for a moment about Brian Hoyer being back in New England. I think he's a good Band-Aid and a cheap one, I might add, because they're getting him for $1.05 million. So
right.
from the Colts,
he's a Band-Aid. That's a great analogy. Unless Newton goes there. But he's dependable. He's a game manager. He's everything that Coy Detmer was to the Philadelphia Eagles as a manager. That's the best way to describe him.
right?
And he's dependable for a year because after this year, there are quarterbacks that will potentially be on the market. I don't know what Belichick's thinking. I know that Deshaun Watson might be available after this year, and maybe Deshaun Watson and the New England Patriots are a match made in heaven.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. I'd like to see how that plays out. So, finally, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know how they can contact you?
Okay, great. I'm on fansided.com. I cover the Jaguars and the NFL. I also cover the Marlins and Major League Baseball. And yes, by the way, guys, there's still plenty to read, even though we're in a holding pattern for both sports. On Twitter, I can be found at DM719907.
Okay. One other quarterback note I should mention: Cody Kessler will be gone in New England. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when. So.
I thought he was already released, but if he hasn't been released, he will be released.
Yeah, well, they're just waiting to find out who's gonna. If he isn't gone now, he'll be gone by the NFL draft. You mentioned Jordan Love, and I think that's a most likely landing spot. Anything you wanted to close out real quick, David?
No, not really. I look forward to talking to you guys on Thursday.
You bet. We're looking forward
Thanks,
to it as
David.
well. Thanks for being on the program, David. Appreciate you very much. All right. Good night.
Appreciate it, guys. Bye-bye.
He brought up some interesting points.
I think there's going to be a little more parity in the divisions this year, as there hasn't been necessarily. I think the Patriots kind of really ruled that division. Granted, Breeze was up there too, but I don't see the Patriots dominating, obviously, this year, without Brady. It'll be interesting to see, but I think putting Brady on a different team gives him new challenges. He's got some really good weapons, so I'd be careful, but I think more parity in the different divisions this year with the movement that we've seen so far.
Well, David and I talked on an interesting point about one particular instance where, he talks about the NFC South, but what do you think of the NFC North? Those four quarterbacks.
I think it'll be interesting because I think it depends on the complement that each of the teams get, because each of the teams have lost some key players, or maybe not key players, but players that did have an influence in the game. And it'll be interesting to grade whether the moves were upgrades or not. The Bears, most notably, obviously, the quarterback position. At least now Trubinsky's got, it's a competition.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And that's what Matt Nagy gave me a year or two to figure it out. And at some point, Matt Nagy's job is going to be on the line, every other coach in the league. Back in the day when it was always a 5-year plan, that plan is down to 3.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know if it's 3 anymore these days.
Well, if you're really horribly bad, you're out 1 or 2 years. 3, it's a different story. But yeah,
there's too much money in the NFL right now.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, it's a ruthless league. You better get out of it what you can.
Exactly.
You have a very limited window is what you really have. And if you can't go ahead and maximize that window, they'll bring you in, they'll shuttle you out. Our next guest, Bill Winters, will tell you that they'll shovel you out like a vacuum cleaner.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody that we've always talked to, you're on a year-to-year contract. Not like baseball, basketball, hockey, or more security. The stakes are higher. You certainly have guaranteed money, of course.
Right. It'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting division. Detroit's made a lot of different moves, too, so that, the Packers have sat back and they've made some moves, don't get me wrong. It'll just be interesting, LaFleur, in his second season, how he does.
Yeah, I didn't see much of an aerial attack from LaFleur last year. Does he open it up a little bit more? Does he get more familiar? The pending potential move for Devin Funchess, who was with Carolina, was with the Colts, lands up in Green Bay. You give Rodgers another target, and all of a sudden, the additions and subtractions that they made over the year, at what point can they become more prolific, though?
It is, but it just depends on how good of a year Funchess has. Last year he didn't play because he had his collarbone issue.
Right.
The year before that, his numbers were down. His best numbers were in 2017. But again, who was throwing to him, and that makes a difference too.
Sure. Well, you got a guy like Aaron Rodgers throwing to you. You better get open. He'll find you.
Yeah, let's hope.
My question with the Packers is how committed are they to the passing attack?
I think they're going to be more aggressive in that area. But by how much, I'm not sure, because he's definitely a run heavy coach.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And honestly, I think you almost, let's face it, Aaron Rodgers isn't a young pup like he used to be either, though. So he actually needs a more balanced game. So he's not being, all he's being was attacked. Years ago he broke his collarbone. And why? Because all they did was pass. And so everybody knew rush the passer.
Yeah, they didn't have a good quarterback to pass them the football, as we've dealt with. All it takes is one big injury, Candy, in this league, and your season is upside down.
Oh, yeah.
The first lesson I ever learned of such a thing was in 1979 when Gary Danielson, who many people know as a broadcaster for CBS, does the Southeastern Conference, suffered a knee injury, ironically, in the fourth preseason game of the year against then the Baltimore Colts, and the Lions were relegated to Joe Reed, and then they were also relegated to a little-known Jeff Comlo out of the University of Delaware, and that led to a 2-14 season. The only thing I can say about it is it led to Billy Sims, the running back out of Oklahoma, and they went 9-7 the following year when they had Danielson back and they had Billy Sims. But one big catastrophic injury, and boom, your season is history.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
So why don't you let everybody know how they can find some of our content?
So if you're looking for the broadcasting side of the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network, you want to look at any place you get your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Deezer, any of those, or you can go to www.southfloridatribune.com. We put all the broadcasts up afterwards on that. And we have all kinds of writers that write and send us content. Anything from motivational to news to sports news to...
So that you can listen to people like former offensive lineman for the New York Giants, Bill Winters. Bill, welcome back to the broadcast.
Good evening, Scott. How are you?
Oh, we're doing fine, thank you, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
So you get ready to
Hi,
talk
Candy.
about... you ready to talk some more pro football?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yeah. I love the fire in Mr. Winters. Okay. So, all right, let's lead off with P.J. Walker, reunited with Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers.
Well, I think I mentioned that that's probably what was going to go on a couple of weeks ago. I got a chance to see P.J. Up close at a couple of rough-nosed practices. We're Jersey boys who grew up in Elizabeth. And I told you, I made the comment a while back that I'm kind of laughing at the naivety Carolina Panthers owner who's a techie who wants to make a big name for himself. Just like the guy that owns the Clippers, they're, billionaires from technology. So, of course, Matt Rule had P.J. Walker at Temple and it made his career. And then he went over to Baylor and walked into a situation where the administration was, on all trying to turn the program around and threw a well-respected coach Hart-Browse under the bus because their program is it's not a coach's job. We won't get into all that, but they kind of made him a sacrificial lamb. And PJ was able to, Rule was able to come in there and turn Baylor around because everybody from the administration to the athletic director to the school were behind it, and that's what it takes to win. So I think he got way too much credit for turning that program around, and then he landed an unbelievable contract with the Carolina Panthers, which was an obscene amount of money for an unproven, guy. And, of course, he's going to go out and get the guy that made it for him, P.J. Walker. And it wouldn't surprise me to watch him and Bridgewater be 1A and 1B with the Panthers during the course of the season. Because the guy that makes their offense go is, Christian McCaffrey. And they're going to, they both are good quarterbacks, and you got to have two to win a championship. It's a great landing spot for PJ, and he's been hovering around for a while on developmental rosters, and now he's found a home with the head coach that he had in college, and who's kind of made that coach's career. So, like I said before, I think sometimes coaching is highly overrated. It depends on the players you have.
Yeah, I should point out to you. I should point out to you that the Panthers have added Robbie Anderson, the wide receiver for the New York Jets, so that should give PJ or Teddy another target, Bill, just so you know.
Yeah, well, and then there's a lot of, and then we have the draft as well.
Right. Good point. Just want to throw that in there. Go ahead, continue.
All right, well, what else?
Let's stay in the XFL. Jordanta'amu went across the I-70 freeway from St. Louis to Kansas City. Once upon a time, there was a World Series between the Cardinals and the Royals that was off of I-70, and now all of a sudden one quarterback is going across the interstate, and as a result, he has an opportunity to learn under Patrick Mahomes. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, they're both going to learn because I just found this out through the QT. Mahomes doesn't know how to read coverages that well, so he's only going to get better. And he also, he's kind of lit up the league this year by running back there like Fran Tarkenton and finding open guys and turning negative plays into positive plays. Coaches are going to have, they're going to have to leave a spy in there to try to contain him, and maybe they'll come up with some kind of defense that maybe won't make Patrick Mahomes so lethal. But you got, Ta'amu was a great player with the St. Louis Battlehawks. I got to watch him play, so I got to watch him in a scrimmage. He's a great athlete and has a lot of skills. And the XFL, I told you before, was a quarterback-driven league. And, there's probably two or three of those quarterbacks are going to get a chance to show their wares at the next level because of their production at the XFL. And Ta'amu was one of them with the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Yeah.
So it's a good move for him with Kansas City.
Yeah, I think Cardale Jones' stock went down in the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in the XFL. We'll get to that another day. But you're right, these two top quarterbacks definitely will get an opportunity, and I hope that they stick with their respective clubs for sure. And I think the odds are very high that they probably will. With that said, okay, let's go on to Cam Newton. You predict that he's going to go to the Washington Redskins after the draft.
Yes. The problem that we're having right now is nobody knows about Cam Newton's health. Nobody's getting a fair evaluation because everybody is sitting at home. Doctors, players are signing contracts, and it doesn't mean anything until they pass their physical, and they've got to figure out how to handle this McGilla. But I'm sure I just got done watching. We can't let our economy collapse. So I'm thinking that probably the NBA is going to start playing around the middle of May, and we're going to get back to the way things were over the next couple of weeks because we have to do that in order for our country to survive. And people may not like it, but that's just the way it's going to be.
Right.
And a lot of their angst is tied to how they feel about Trump. It has nothing to do with Trump, but both sides got to cut together and get this virus done, and we will get it done. And we'll be back to having an economic system, and then we'll be able to figure out, what we're going to do with players as far as the contracts they've signed and how they're going to sign. How they're going to figure out whether a player's going to pass it with the coronavirus or whatever. And that's in Cam. That's in Cam Newton's situation right now. That nobody's going to make a move on him. I think till after the draft. But I think that you got a solid quarterback, and I just think there's only two places he can wind up. And after doing all the diagnosis, I still think he's going to wind up with Ron Rivera, with the Washington Redskins and be a mentor for Haskins. And they're going to see what they have after the draft. Because you know that the Redskins are going to take the best player in the draft in the second pick, which is the defensive end from Ohio State by the name of Chase Young.
Right, yeah, he'll be a good pick. Well, the one guy that made it up to Washington quicker than Newton was Kyle Allen, Newton's backup. So,
And it only reinforces you.
Yeah, right. I could joke around that you and I got the wrong Carolina quarterback up in Washington last week, but who knows? They could very well be teammates because that quarterback situation I think is far from settled for sure.
Oh yeah. And then also, the one thing that's a wild card in all this is the offensive tackle. Trent, I forget his last name. It'll come to me in a minute.
Williams. Trent Williams.
Yeah, Trent Williams. They're going to work a trade for him. So who the heck knows? They may be able to trade him and also get a quarterback in that quarterback room later on in the draft. Okay, there's three or four really good quarterbacks. Okay, so Burrow's going number one to Cincinnati. The Washington's going to take Chase Young, and then we'll see what the Lions do, which is going to trigger the draft from there. Some draft boards have Tua Tagovailoa, being drafted. We'll see. It's too early yet. You got to put the pads on, and we need more of an evaluation. And he's in the same boat as Cam Newton. Well, so we'll see from there.
Yeah, Tua won't go to Detroit if he gets drafted in the third round. A team's gonna have to trade up to get him if they want him that badly. That's all I can say. So with that said, let's talk about Jameis Winston. He's a really interesting riddle. We've talked about Pittsburgh. Now I've heard talk about him potentially going to the Saints. I don't know about the Saints, but I could see it. What are your observations about Jameis Winston?
My personal opinion, the best place for him is with the Steelers. Get under Tomlin. Get with Roethlisberger. Maybe be the heir apparent to Roethlisberger because we don't know how much time Roethlisberger has left, but he's going to come back this year. And they've got a good quarterback room with him in there, and that might be just what he needs. A tougher team with tougher guys, and maybe Jameis will produce. And I think that's the best situation. I know that there's been a debate about whether or not the Chargers might be a good place for him. I just don't think that's gonna work. Some people like him going to New England. I just don't think he fits in.
No way.
The culture up there was Stedman with New England. So my personal opinion is I think this is another move that the Pittsburgh Steelers will make. once the draft is over, and I always go back to Charlie Batch. Okay, you got a good, solid backup in Jameis Winston that, might be the type of guy that might be a great number 2. And with the Steelers, I think that's the best fit.
Yeah, if I were a betting man, I'd go with the Steelers. However, Bill, I wouldn't really rule out him going to Miami or Jacksonville, just, because I don't think there's the situations at quarterback are totally settled. Jacksonville more so than Miami, but you never know. But those are two that I'm just throwing out there for the sake of conversation. All of this will play out. All right, let's talk about tua'svideo. Go ahead. What are your thoughts about what he put out there?
Well, I think he's got to let everybody know that he's healthy. That's all fine and good. I'm sure his agent is trying to market him as much as possible. But I think Keyshawn Johnson said it best. If I'm a general manager and I'm a personnel guy, that's fine. I know that Mel Kiper really liked the workout. It really helped his draft status. But I personally think that doesn't mean anything until we put the pads on. Okay, and you work this guy out for a couple of days like a racehorse and running. And if I'm a general manager, I just think it's too risky. He's too injury prone, and I think he's better off going late in the rounds like we talked about several weeks earlier. Wouldn't be surprised if he winds up with New England. But I don't think he's going to go that low in the draft. But the reality is that, he's damaged goods. And, I just don't think that even the social media workout and doctors saying he's great, it means nothing until you put the pads on. Right. You see how he can hold up through training camp. We had Deshaun Watson blow a knee out, dropping back as a quarterback last year in training camp. What you guys don't understand is NFL is a game played by men, right. Not youngsters coming out of college that look good on social media.
Right.
All right, and but that's the way it is right now, and that's what I'd be doing if I was his agent. But I'm not drafting him high because of his injury record. That's just the way it is.
You won't get
I'm sure Bill Parcells would be saying the same thing.
You won't get a debate on me with that. Anytime a guy damaged goods and you can't see the eye test, and I can see a guy like him sliding pretty low. Now, do I think he'll get past center 15? I doubt it, but I can't see him as a top 5 pick unless the Miami Dolphins were to gamble and they want Ryan Fitzpatrick to go ahead and lead him, and then he gets a medical red shirt. And let's not lose sight of one key point, Bill. Stephen Ross likes to make flashy moves, and I think that, he did that many years ago when Ndamukong Suh got lured out of Detroit to go there. Of course, that situation lasted inside of 2 or 3 years. That didn't last long. And then he sent a lot of high-profile players out there, and then he'll bring them in. So Stephen Ross is a different bird, who, by the way, Bill Parcells did not want to work for. He worked for Wayne Huizenga when he owned the Dolphins. And that's no indictment on Stephen Ross, because I'm going to tell you what Stephen Ross has done for the South Florida community in terms of his generosity, redoing that stadium the way he's done it, and getting a Super Bowl here, and all the things he does in the community. There aren't enough words that can echo itself in terms of his impact as a businessman. He's even done a lot for his alma mater, the University of Michigan, as well. So, but where I'm going with Tua is he likes to make flashy moves. I could potentially see it. I would find that the Dolphins shouldn't have to trade up to number 3 to do it, any more than I believe that Mitchell Trubisky, you didn't have to trade up to number 2 to do it, like the 49ers had no problem signing off on that decision, because if they don't think much of him, all the 49ers did was get draft capital, and the Bears now have a potential backup quarterback. We know how these play up. So, yeah, I'm not big on the video either.
Yeah, well, all I'm going to say to you is this, Ross he's an owner. I think the fact that the Dolphins have been down for a long time, and then he took a lot of heat for, apparently tanking, and then having them go 5-5, maybe he learned that maybe it isn't about the hype, it's about playing a personnel evaluation. And I think that, that Ross is going to sit right at the 5th spot, and Justin Herbert would be a great pick for them out of Oregon. Rumor is they kind of like him. So there are some draft boards that have him going in the 5th round to the Miami Dolphins instead of Tua Tagovailoa. And to tell you the truth, winning solves everything, not flash. Okay, there's nothing worse than doing flash and having your team not be very good because you took as entertainment rather than building a team with personnel people telling you who the better player is.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill.
Maybe learned a lesson.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill, that I could see Justin Herbert being the 5th pick overall in the draft. For some reason, that makes a whole lot of sense. But you mentioned the words damaged goods. Justin Herbert is not damaged goods. And that would be the...
He's all the quarterback.
Yeah, he sure is, isn't he, buddy? So,
he's got all the tools.
All right, we talked about another wild card in this draft. Utah quarterback Jordan Love, I believe, is the guy that New England could potentially land. We talked about this earlier. What are your thoughts about Jordan Love going to New England?
Well, my experts are telling me that there's 4 really good quarterbacks in the draft. And Love has been on a team that really didn't reflect his ability because maybe they didn't have the wide receivers that like Alabama had and Herbert had at Oregon. And New England's in a good situation with Stedham. In fact, McCourty came out the other day and said he has a lot of confidence in him. And that might be a great pick for them in the last round to get a backup quarterback to add to their quarterback room. But Stedman's going to be the starter there. They have a lot of confidence in him. He's got a year under his belt. But you got to find another quarterback, so he might be a good risk to take.
Well, they haven't had to do it in a long time. I don't remember the last time the Patriots drafted a quarterback in the first round. If my memory serves me correctly, didn't Drew Bledsoe get drafted in the first round?
Yeah, the problem, here's the thing I see general managers doing.
What's that?
It's too risky to take a quarterback first.
Oh, yeah.
Burrow kind of set himself away from everybody, but Cincinnati's not a very good team.
Right.
In fact, Cincinnati's never going to be a good team because the organization is cheap, and that's just the way it is.
Oh, yeah.
They're a flash in the pan. I remember they had a quarterback by the name of Greg Cook, who was unbelievable. They were an expansion team that did really well. As soon as he got hurt, he could flush the team down the toilet.
Right.
And they had Kenny Anderson. All right, so one player does not make a franchise. There's a lot of pressure on Burrow coming to Cincinnati, but that's where he's going. All right, so the reality of the situation is, I think for the rest of the league, they don't want to be put in a situation where they're drafting a quarterback like Tua or a high round draft choice, and then having to put, they're not even waiting anymore. Okay, if you look at the really good quarterbacks that played outside of Roethlisberger, none of those guys really started when they were drafted.
Right.
Okay, and so there's exceptions to the rules, but I don't see any quarterback in the draft coming out and starting right away. Okay, I think that's one of the reasons why they haven't traded Dalton yet either. They want to see what they have. They're going to wait until they get these guys in the fold, and then you go from there. Even though the quarterbacks in college are being coached up better, and Burrow might be the more NFL-ready quarterback than all of them. Troy Aikman was like that, but then again, Troy struggled his first year too. So it's all about organization. It's all about depth in your team, and I just think that a lot of general managers now are not going to put all their eggs in one basket with a quarterback in the first round. Not when you can find them in the late first rounds or second or third round picks. Right. Yeah, that's just the way I think the league is going.
Well,
okay, I think Carolina's going with P.J. Walker, and I think they feel really good about it. And then, as far as I understand it, they didn't take much of a cap hit signing Bridgewater either. Right. So there's an economic component to this.
I mean,
and I think in the future, they're going to spread it out a little bit more and stop taking so much risk with one guy. Because that one guy doesn't play, sets your organization back 10 years.
Yeah, Brian Hoyer is a good steadying influence for the Patriots, so you have a little bit of a veteran presence, number one. Number two, Andy Dalton's on a team-friendly deal, so why would you get rid of a guy unless you do have a much better gauge of what Joe Burrow does? So I think you make good points on both ends. All right, Bill, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you carry it from here and let everybody know how they can reach you and how they can find you. The floor is yours, Bill.
All right, well, you can find me on my YouTube channel. Just type in Bill Winters Football. The purple circle will come up with me wearing a Nike hat and click on subscribe. You can go to my Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/BWinters55 and it'll come up. And then you can also go to my Wikipedia page. I also have a website, billwinters.biz. I would love for you guys to take a look at that, see a gallery of pictures of my playing days, and also maybe take a look at my book and order it. And then, of course, and last but most, I should say, is we can find us on the South Florida Tribune, all right, by going to Spotify, iHeart, and a lot of the other podcast search engines, and typing in Motor Mouth, 2 words, and Wow Bill Winters, and you'll see our show come up. We'd like you to continue to follow us.
Well done, Bill. That's all I've got to say. Look forward to bringing it back on Thursday's edition of the Sports Exchange, and of course we'll have our show on Friday night this week. So, meanwhile, folks, on behalf of Candy, has something you want to add? I
would just like to say that I hope everybody stays safe out there. Follow all the proper procedures that people have set forth. Stay home. If you don't need to be out, don't be out. Take precautions. And for anybody that is sick with the virus, we wish you the best and a speedy recovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. What about you, Bill?
Just do what the government's telling you. Stay low, keep social distance. We'll get through this, and we'll all come together as a country and beat this thing like we always do.
Cheers, Bill. So on behalf of Rick Curti, David Levin, and Bill Winters, Candy Ebling, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Manmouth. Glad that you can join us, and we look forward to seeing you on another edition of the Sports Exchange, and of course, our show with Bill on Friday. Have a great night, everybody, and once again, thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.